As Hashem, today's daf is daf nun. Okay, so we're going to begin on daf nun amid aleph, just to review the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussed over here on what are the tumas. Would a nazir become tamei, and he would have to matar himself, restart the count, bring the karbanos, and restart the count. So obviously, if he touches tumas mace, but how do you define that? So the Mishnah gave you 11 examples. The first example is a mace, simply being if he touches one dead body. But then the Mishnah says, hi, Lewis, we just began. We're just reviewing the Mishnah and just bring us where we're up to. The Mishnah said that on the tumas, we just started. These are the tumas that a nazir will mess up his whole naziris. The first thing is if he touches a mace, a dead body. That's what the first thing. Then the Mishnah says, not only if he touches a dead body, but al kazayis min hameis. If he touches, let's say, 1 1/4 ounce of the flesh of a dead body, 1 1/4 ounce, a little bit of a kazayis from a mace, he becomes tamei. So the Gemara tells us a little story that Rab Meir passed away, and his yeshiva closed up. He didn't have a son-in-law to take over. So he closed up. So Rabbi Yehuda said, don't let any of the boys enter my yeshiva. They have a different style of learning, and they're going to mess things up by bringing Rab Meir's style of learning into my yeshiva. Okay, but the Gemara says, Dochak Sumchas v'nichnas. This person, Sumchas, came into the yeshiva, and he quoted this Mishnah that Rab Meir's version of the Mishnah is that the Nazir will take his haircut on a mace, a kazayas from a mace, a dead body, and even a kazayas from a mace. So Rabbi Yehuda says, how could you be gurus that in the Mishnah? If you tell me on 1 1/4 ounces of a dead body of flesh, a kazayas from a mace, the nazir is megaleach, certainly on the entire mace itself. So Rabbi Meir had it wrong. That's where we left off yesterday. Rabbi Yehuda says the whole quote of Rabbi Meir was wrong in this Mishnah. It should not discuss a mace. Certainly, if kazayas from a mace, of course, a mace itself. So we go on top of Nun Amid Aleph. Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Yoimru, Rabbi Yossi, who heard this conversation, was off to the side. Yoimru, people will say, Meir Shachav. Rabbi Meir passed on. Yehuda cause, Rabbi Yehuda is angry. Yossi Shasak and Mr. Rabbi Yossi is going to be quiet. I have a way to answer Rabbi Meir, defend Rabbi Meir. Because Torah, what's going to happen to the Torah? If we're going to start putting down Rabbi Meir, then anything that Rabbi Meir said is going to be disregarded, and that Rabbi Meir had many traditions that we need to follow. So Rabbi Yossi took it upon himself to defend Rabbi Meir. It actually should say the mace, corpse in the Mishnah, but it's possible to have a corpse that's less than 1.2 ounces. How about that? Rabbi Yossi, it's talking about, our Mishnah is teaching you, mace she'ein olav kazayis basar, that a dead body that only has on it a kazayas, a basar. It doesn't have a kazayas basar. It's less than 1.2 ounces. So you have this super tiny baby that has less than a kazayas, a 1 1/4 ounce of flesh on it. So because it's one entity of a body, it's matama the nazir. So the Gemara says, okay, but who cares if it doesn't have a kazayas basar? But let's say inside that tiny, tiny baby, it has aver, one of the averim of a person, let's say a finger. A finger, if it's a complete aver, doesn't need a kazayas basar. The fact that it's a limb, that should be enough to be mitama the basar, the mitama the human being. Batayin yoimar al eva min megalech akula lekolshkein. We're going to have the same question. If you touch a finger of a dead body or a limb from a dead body, already the nazir would have to be magaleach. So akula, if you touch the entire human being, even if you don't have a kazayas basar on it, it should be mitame the nazir, because the fact is that there's an aver in that little tiny baby. So the Gemara says it's possible to have a super tiny baby that you wouldn't even consider that it has averim on it, doesn't have limbs. How's that possible? It's only talking about a stillborn, shaloi niskashru evarav, that begidim, that his limbs did not form with veins and sinews and arteries. It just was showing that it was about to form. He said that somewhere else. So Hachinami, we can apply where Rabbi Yochanan said that our Mishnah is talking about Benefo Shalom Nishkashre Evarav Begidim, that the stillborn that didn't form together with sinews and arteries. So basically, you have three things. So the Mishnah that says if the Nazir touches a dead body, it's talking about a certain type of dead body. Number one, it's a dead body that does not have a kazayis basar. That if you total up this like stillborn tiny baby, you don't have 1.25 ounces of flesh on it. Plus, all the limbs and all the avarim in the body are not yet formed, because in order to be called an aver, there has to be some veins and arteries going to it. So it didn't form yet. So therefore, the only reason why this aver is tameh, the only reason why this body is tameh is because it represents a human body. And that's why, that's the chiddush of al hameis and then kazayis min hameis. It's less than a kazayis, but it's still a full body. So it's hard to imagine that. Okay. Rava says, Rava says mace does not refer to a dead body. And that's pashut. If a Nezer touches a dead body, certainly he gets disqualified. But we're talking about l'roiv binyani, l'roiv minyani, she'ein behem roiv atzamayis. If you have, let's say, the most of the build of a human being, you take 2 thighs and a shank bone. So you can see the biggest bones of the body. So if you have the biggest bones of the body, that you can see the shape that it was at one time a human being, even though they don't weigh a roiva means 1/4 of a kaf. It doesn't weigh, let's say, 15 ounces. Still it could be metama the nazir. So really, halameis doesn't refer to a dead body or a corpse. It refers to the largest bones of that are still intact, that are still whole, that don't have 1/4 of a kav. Still, the nazir will get disqualified by touching that. Now, although you're going to ask me, in our Mishnah, it said that in order for a nazir to be disqualified, he has to touch bones that are weighing 1/2 a kav, that's weighing at least 30 ounces. So what is our Mishnah talking about? Our Mishnah is talking about crushed bones. If you have crushed bones in a bowl that weigh 30 ounces, then if he touches that, or if he touches that, then he becomes disqualified, the nazir. Okay, but if it's fully intact bones, then it doesn't even have to be a roiva at samais, but the fact that it came from you can see it's the basis of a human being, therefore the nazir becomes tameh. Then the Mishnah says, al kazayis minimes, if he touches 1.1, a kazayis is 1.25 ounces, let's say, or if he touches kazayis netzel, kazayis of fluid. Now, what is netzel? I mean, you got to imagine the flesh of a human being that liquefies. So that liquefies, if the nazir will touch that or go into the room with this liquefied version of flesh, then he becomes tameh. So netzel is liquefied flesh of a human being. First, step 1, a human being will decompose. The flesh decomposes. Step 2, it'll turn into a liquid. It will liquefy. Now the Brisa says, "Ve'ezo netzel." How would you know it's netzel? It's liquefied flesh. Basar hamesh shakarash. If you see that it congealed back. After it liquefied, it congealed. Or moil, it's still in its liquefied form. Shehirtiach, that if you heat it up, either it bubbles or it smells. It has a certain smell to it. Now, it's very important to know, because if it's not human flesh, if this liquid, let's say saliva or snot from the mace, it wouldn't be matama the person. It's only if it's liquefied flesh. The question is, how do you know it's flesh that liquefied? Maybe it's the saliva that liquefied. So that's what the Brisa teaches you. It congealed, or if you would cook up this or heat up this liquid, it would make a smell. Then you know it's from the flesh. So the Gemara just asks a basic question. Hey Chedami, what's the case of the Brisa talking about? If you don't know it comes from human flesh, hikarash ma'hava. What's the difference if it congeals? What's the difference if it congeals? But if you do know it's comes from flesh, then afagav the loy karash. Then even if it doesn't congeal, it should be metama. In other words, why do you need it that the flesh had to have congealed? So the Gemara says very simple. This is a chemistry test. Amar Rab Yirmiyah, bistam, it's liquid. I know it came from a mace, from a dead body. I just don't know if it's the flesh of the dead body or is this liquid from the saliva of the dead body. So ikaresh, if you can see that it congeals, then mayalu, it is liquefied, it's liquefied flesh. Loi karash, but if it does not congeal, so then dilma kicha v'nihu, maybe it's spit or snot, so therefore it's not metama de nazir. So therefore you need these chemistry properties to be able to know for sure that this came from the flesh. And there are two properties. Either you see it starts congealing, or you see this liquid that starts to, if you would bubble it up, if you heat it up, it would bubble and make a smell. So then you know it's flesh. Now the Gemara says another question. Now we know, the Gemara just goes on to, now we're talking about liquefied flesh. We know, and this is a side point, the Gemara now wants to know an interesting question. You know, if you go into, let's say, a Stop and Shop and you lift up a piece of meat in the meat section, so a person will become tameh, because that's nevela meat. It's not slaughtered meat, it's nevela meat. Now, the question is, we see that by a human being, liquefied flesh has a din like regular flesh. And it's metama, in oil and everything like that, like a regular human being. A nevela, as is, a hard piece of nevela, a piece of meat that you pick up in the grocery store, and in the Goyish grocery store, if you touch it, you become tameh. If you would carry it, you would become tameh. Of course, we're not noig to care about Tumen today, but in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you cared about it. What happens if it liquefied? That's the question of the Gemara. Maybe this whole idea of meat that decomposes and liquefies, to consider it like its original properties, is a halacha l'Moshe Messinai, and will not apply by Tumas Nevela. That's the question. Boya Menei Abaya Merabba. Abaya asked the question from Merabba. Yesh neitzel lebehema or ein neitzel lebehema. Would you say that liquefied nevela is considered a nevela, or ein neitzel lebehema? Or would you say that there's no such a thing of liquefied nevela? Either it's a meat that's nevela, or if it liquefies and decomposes, it's not a nevela. Mi amrin, and do you say gemira, that there's a halacha Moshe Messinai, neitzel da'asam adam. Only if it liquefies from a human flesh do you consider it human flesh. A decomposed, liquefied human flesh is considered to be a human flesh. Aval da'asam behema, but liquefied animal flesh, we wouldn't consider it as nevela. No, maybe there's no difference, and we would consider it nevela despite the fact that it liquefied. So the Gemara just explains their question. Wait a second. There's an opinion in the Gemara that says that tumas nevela. Let's say you have a nevela, a piece of animal meat that decomposes. So if it decomposes and a human can't eat it, there's an opinion that says it does not become it once it decomposes, it's not metama at all. If a human can't eat this nevela meat, then it's not metama at all. So that's what he says. So this Mandiyama says, Tuma chamura, nevela is considered nevela as long as ad leger, only a human ger. If a goy can eat it, then it's tuma chamura. That means it has a din nevela. But if only a caliph can eat it, only if a dog can eat it, it decomposed that only a dog can eat it, then it's tuma kala. That means it's not a nevela anymore. Even a regular piece of meat that decomposed and it's so spoiled that only a dog can eat it, so it's not a nevela anymore. It's metama, only food, but it's not metama, human being. So shape, that's certainly very makes sense. Then there's not even a question. Your question doesn't begin. Why? Because in order for a piece of meat to liquefy, got spoiled first, right? So once it got spoiled, it's not fit for human consumption. So it's not an avela anymore. But according to another opinion that holds tuma chamura ad lekelim, it remains an avela. It remains a severe nevela, even if only a dog can eat it, right? So our question is, my iklamema, what's the story over here? What's the story over here? If a piece of meat decomposes that only a dog can eat it, this opinion, this shita holds that it has a din avela. The question is, let's say it went one step further. Not only did it decompose, but it actually liquefied. Would you consider it a nevela as well? Would it be a liquefied? Is there such a thing called liquefied nevela that's matama, a human being? Hashma coming here by a bird, right? The bird, okay? Himchu ba'ur. If it was melted, if you took the bird fat or a bird that's a nevela, and you heated it up in fire and then you ate it, tame, you become tame. Bechama, but if it got heated up in fire, so in the sun, so an nevela bird that for some reason, let's say it was shot down by an arrow, and now it's on the floor, and what made it, what heated it up was the sun. Well, the sun made it not fit for human consumption, but it's fit for an animal consumption. Never, so therefore, since it's not fit for human consumption, tahar, it's tahar. Now we're talking about it melted it down into a liquid, because a bird, in order to be metama of oif tar, in order to be metama a human being, it's not enough to touch it. You have to actually drink it or eat it. So if it melted it down by the sun, the Raisa says it's tar. Very simple. So we have our complete proof. If you're going to tell me that if ad lekelev means that if until it's raw, it's edible for a dog, then it's strong enough for a dog. So then afil b'chama nami. So then even if you eat it, you should become tameh. Why do you remain tar if you drink it? Elamai, the reason why you become tahar is because it liquefied. It liquefied. Once it became like a liquid, even though a dog could drink it, but once it liquefied, it doesn't have a din. It doesn't have a din nevela anymore. So the Gemara says that price is not approved. Why? Emes mamachale, when basa de asruche bechama. When did this nevela fat become melted down after it got into the sun? And kiven the asrach, since it got into the sun and got spoiled, even a dog can't eat it. Havale offer, it's like dirt, and therefore it's dirt. It's not even a dog can eat it. So then it's tahar. It's tahar. So therefore that doesn't explain the brisa. What we're talking about over here in our Gemara, what our Gemara's question was, if it liquefied, if the nevela liquefied, that a dog could eat it, would it still be considered a nevela? That brisa is talking about the bird's nevela liquefied, that even a dog can't eat it because it liquefied because of the sun, and the sun made it so that it's spoiled not only for a human, but even a dog wouldn't eat it, and therefore it's afar, it's like dirt, eating dirt, therefore someone who eats that is tar. New Gemara, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Kol hanitzek tahar chutz midvash hazifim v'atzapiches. So if you look at the picture over here, this Mishnah is discussing this. If I pour water from one cup to another cup, the bottom cup is tameh, and the top pitcher is tahar. So then the top pitcher remains tar. I mean, you don't say that nitzak, this connection over here, the connection of the pouring connects the bottom cup with the top cup to make the water in the pitcher tameh. No, the water in the pitcher remains tahar. But if we go a step further, if you're pouring a certain type of honey, very thick type of honey, so then this, because for some reason we don't know why yet, but this is like considered a food that connects what's in the spoon, the honey in the spoon, with the honey in the jar. So if the spoon was tamei, and therefore the honey in the spoon is tamei, then the top now, the honey in the jar becomes tamei. So that's what the Mishnah says. Kol hanitzik tar, any pouring is tahar. Doesn't connect the bottom keli with the top. Looks midvash hazifim b'atzapichas, certain type of honey from or tzapichas, very thick honey, a batter honey will connect together. We go to the top of the page, Nunam Beis, Beis Shammai Oimin, Beis Shammai adds, Af hamikva shel grisim v'shel pool, v'shel mipnei he soledus lachrao. If you're pouring porridge, let's say crushed beans, right? A stew of crushed beans or whole beans, and you pour from one keli to another keli, if the bottom one is tamei, the top one will also become tamei because the pouring, the stream, it connects the bottom with the top. The stream connects the bottom of the top, and Rabbi Shammai gives a reason. That's very interesting because when you're going to stop pouring, somehow the stream will end up into the top keli. So therefore, it ends up, it almost looks like it's connecting the bottom from the top, and therefore, that's why the top keli will remain tamei if you're pouring a stew of crushed beans. Now, the Gemara asks the question, according to the Tanakama, Boya Rami Bachama asked the question, would you say like this, Yesh nitzuk la'oichlin or ein nitzuk la'oichlin? Let's take a look at beef broth. Let's say beef broth, okay? Would you say it's not water, but it's not honey? According to the Tanakama, would you say that if the bottom keli was tamei, would it connect the broth that's in the ladle because of the stream that's coming down from it? That's the question. Is broth like honey or not? Broth basically could congeal into a food. So would you say that congeal will make it a one unit, or do you consider it like water? That's the question of the Gemara. Mi amrinim, do you say mishum de ispe riri? Because with this broth, there's certain types of things that return back to the original, like glue, like it's when you're going to stop the pour, it's some of it stops in mid-air and actually goes back to the ladle. That's why honey, because the reason why honey, you consider it as a connection, because when you stop pouring honey, imagine you stop pouring honey, there's a little honey on the edge of it that you can just pour back into the jar. That's why the Chacham said that honey was connection. Bahani leis bariri, but when you're pouring liquefied fats, there's no pieces that go back, that return back into the ladle. Dilma, or the whole reason of honey is a connection, mishum desmichim, because they're like thick. This also has a thick texture to it. So what the Gemara's question is, basically, the Chachamim said honey is a connection. Now, why is honey a connection? Why do we connect the bottom to the top? Is it because when you stop pouring the honey, the honey in mid-air will return back to the jar? That's why we consider it a connection to the top. Whatever is the stream that connects it, connects the bottom to the top, because the top will eventually go back into the jar. Or, so then you would say, that doesn't apply to liquefied broth, fats. That wouldn't apply to that. Or perhaps you would say that no, because it has a thick texture to it, that's why honey is considered to be a connection. And therefore, liquefied fats over here would also be considered as somewhat of a connection. And therefore, you would say, yesh nitzik la'oichlin. So the Gemara just brings one raya and then slugs it up and doesn't answer the question. Amar Rava said, Tashma, come in here. The chelev hameis shuhu shalem. You have the fat of a human body. The fat of a human body. Imagine the fats of a human. If it's one piece, let's say it's a kazayas, then you melted it down and put it into a cup. So now you have melted fat, human fat, tamei. It's tamei. If a person touches it, it's tamei. because at one time it was one piece. Just because now it's melted into a liquid, you just touch one piece, part of it, you become tamei. Hoyim before it, but let's say it was just little pieces of human fat. The then you melted it together to make it one liquefied unit. Tahar, it's tahar because they're not considered a unit. What makes them into a human? Because of human intervention. So it was never considered one unit, and therefore you would not become tamei. If you want to say that once you liquefy something, it's not considered a unit, once it was liquefied, even if it was at one time a complete piece of fat, but if you liquefied it, it should also be considered separate. So why do we say that if you touch it, you become tamei? Rab Zeir says, I and Marberei Ravina interpreted that brisa is Hochabamayas Kagoin the Bahadi Martechle Salak Abuda de Nure Lepune de Mone Vakarash. It never really separated into a yes, you had a piece of human fat, then you heated it up and it floated to the top, the whole unit floated to the top of the vessel, and it always remained stuck together. It didn't really liquefy, and then it congealed back. It still remained in one tack, it never separated. And because it never separated, that's why it still remains its unit entity. But we don't know. The question is, once you completely liquefy fat, do we consider it as one unit? Amalei, Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, Tashma, come in here, Beshami, Oimim, Af HaMikvah Shal Grisin Shal Pul Shein Salodin Lachrein. Beshami says that a stew of beans and a stew of crushed beans is considered, that the stream is considered a connection because it somehow returns back to the original vessel. So we see clearly that perhaps the Tanakama also agrees that's the reason why honey is considered a unit, because it returns back to the top vessel. The Gemara says, Midi area, what's the proof? Each one gave his own reason. The Chachamim hold it's because the Chachamim hold it's because it's a thick porridge. Honey is thick. That's why it's considered one unit. And Bishami says, Rakami says, no, the reason is because it returns back to the top, but the stream goes back to the top. But each one have their own reason. So could be that the liquefied fats would be considered one unit. Again, this was a side topic that the Gemara discussed. Let's just do for another 2 minutes. Just finish up the Amid. The Gemara says, the Mishnah said, "Valamole tarvid rakav." If you have rakav, human dust, imagine the flesh of a human being turned into dust. Okay, it lost all its moisture, and you have a spade full of dust. Then, if you touch it, you become tamei. Or if he goes into the room that dust is there, even if he didn't touch it, it's betama ba'el meis. The kamashiuri. How much dust is that? What's a spade full of dust? Chizkiyam maloi pieces yad. It's what fits in the palm of a hand of an average human being. Rabbi Yochanan says maloi chafna. It's the entire hand, the palm plus the fingers. Tanya, we learned at a brisa maloi tarvid rakav. It's what's the shear of a maloi tarvid of rakav? Shamru yeshna meikar etzba'os ulamala divrei meir. The brisa says that the shear of a maloi tarvoid, of a spadeful, is from the top of the fingers. Pashtus, it means up to the top, which means to the edge of the fingers, not the palm. The Chachamim say maloi chafna. It's the entire hand, including the fingers. So Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoira. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan who da'amak Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan said the entire hands. He aligns himself up with the opinion of the Chachamim that brisa. Chizkiya says that the dust means the dust that could fit in the palm of your hands. Come on, who did he hold like? Like Rav Meir. He doesn't hold like Rav Meir because Rav Meir says what fits into your fingers, that's what's the shear. But like Rabbanan, and not like the Rabbanan certainly, but who's the shear according to Rabbanan is your entire hand, palm plus fingers. So who does Chizkiya go like? Maloi pieces of yad. And says the Gemara, Omri, Maloi pieces yad, Maloi kishri etzba'is l'mala chachi urahir. Gemara answers like a strange teretz. The Gemara says what fits into your palm of your hand is the same volume that would fit in your fingers, if you clench your fingers, from the top of the fingers to the ends of the fingers, what would fit there is the same amount that would fit into your palm of your hand. So it's really Rameir and Chizkiah are the same thing. Amalei Rav Shimi bar Adel Rapapa. Rav Shimi bar Adel has another answer. That's what Rameir meant. We're misinterpreting Rameir. We're interpreting Rameir meaning from the point that the fingers connect with the hand to the top of the fingers. No, if you keep your hand downwards, Rab Meir meant from the hand, the point that the hand connects to the fingers connect to the hand, and upwards, which is the palm. How did you know Rab Meir said he's talking about where the fingers connect to the hand and you go to the top of the fingers? Maybe he's going the opposite direction. You're holding your hand face downwards at the side of your body, and the hand you measure from where the fingers connect to the hand to the end of the hand, which is actually what fits into your palm. Either way, Chizkiah, who said that the dust is the shear of pisa siyad, what fits in the palm of your hand, aligns himself up with Rameir and Teku. The Gemara leaves it with that opinion. Okay. Interesting.